Live from a basement in Dubuque, Iowa.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
30 minutes from the Field of Dreams and 4 hours from the closest professional sports team.
It's not a lie if you believe it.
On the banks of the Mississippi River.
I'm funny how? I mean funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
It's the Degenerate Sports Betting Show with Matthew Freedman.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
And now your host, Matthew Freedman.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Freeman, Matt F. the Oracle. Welcome to the Degenerate Sports Betting Show, brought to you by Best TV and sponsored by the FTN Network, where you can get all the season-long and daily fantasy and sports betting content your degenerate heart desires, including my fantasy football write-ups and all of my NFL sides, totals, and player props. Use the highly original promo code Freedman for 20% off of your FTN subscription. That is Freedman for 20% off at FTN. Thanks for checking out the show. Subscribe to the Best TV channel on YouTube and rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Oh boy, it is Monday afternoon, and we don't have a game. We have two games. A Monday Night Football Omicron doubleheader. Let's get into today's two games. Producer Thomas Viola, sidekick on the controls, connoisseur, pasta, titan of tomato sauce, Billy Joel Junkie, and long-suffering Jets fan, Tom. Two games. I am broken. Like we are now on that borderline of week 15, week 16. Christmas is just a few days away. I realize I still need to buy gifts for people I presumably care about. I'm done. I am done, Thomas.
It is complete madness. It's like back when they did that horrible doubleheader at the beginning of the season. Remember how they would do that on Monday night? You'd have an actual primetime game, and then you'd have the Tuesday morning football West Coast extravaganza.
Oh, did they not do that this year?
Yeah, they stopped doing that a couple years ago because
Okay.
it was terrible. I think what spurred them on was the time that it was a game in Denver, and it got so rain delayed that it did not kick off until like 11 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare.
Yeah, well, this is a nightmare. I'm just going to say Raiders-Browns, that is a game that no one wants to watch. And it's earlier in the day. It's not even prime time. This is horrible.
Yep. Yeah, that is why they did this. It is a game no one wants to see. At least the Raiders get one less day of rest, if that makes sense, because they have a divisional game next week. They're pretty upset that they didn't get to play their game when it was supposed to be played, but is what it is. The game is being played today. The Browns opened 1.5 because of COVID uncertainty, though. That number doesn't really reflect the change to the Monday night game. And now it sits at Browns -3 last time I checked it.
Tom,
it's moved again?
No, it is big time favor for the Raiders now, because there has been the news of all of the quarterbacks being out for the Browns. So Baker Mayfield is definitely out, and also Case Keenum is out. So it is confirmed that we have whatever his name is. I can't even remember his name right now.
You should remember his name because it's Nick Mullins. The thing that matters about Nick Mullins is that he made his NFL starting debut against the Raiders and won that game for the 49ers.
Yeah.
He is no stranger to this.
Well, that is interesting. What is also interesting is that this line is 2.5 at some books. It moved universally to 2.5, and it has now popped to 3 at some books. So it's 3 at FanDuel, 3 at Caesars, 2.5 at DraftKings, BetMGM, and I believe PointsBet. If you are interested in betting against a COVID-stricken team that is without its top 2 quarterbacks, and also it's looking like we'll be without head coach Kevin Stefanski, then you probably want to bet on the Raiders right now at 2.5, because I bet this line gets to 3 across the industry.
Give me the COVID Browns all the way.
See, this is interesting. Let's talk about this. I would say that the Browns might get back a couple of players before kickoff, because the protocol, like it's still in flux. There's still time for players to test negative if they are vaccinated, and then to be able to return for tonight's game. And so it's possible that a couple players will return. I don't know how much they would really impact the line if they did return, but there's the possibility that the Browns might have some more players who are being discounted right now in the market. I do say like this line feels short given that the Raiders are healthy and they've had extra time to prepare, and like the extra time to prepare, like they have their team and they're preparing with the players they know are playing. With the Browns having extra time to prepare, it doesn't really mean anything because there's so much influx on the roster right now. I haven't bet the Raiders yet because I don't actually trust the Raiders. And I believe that is probably where your head is right now. There's so much uncertainty with this game. I lean towards the Raiders. I haven't bet it yet. Tom, make the case for why you would be betting on the Browns, or maybe let's say flip it around, why you would be betting against the Raiders.
I'm betting on the Browns because of two things. One of them is sound facts and logic. One of them is complete gut feeling. You should not handicap based upon this. Anytime, first off, their running backs are fine. They're going to have Nick Chubb for this game, right?
Yes, and they will also have future Hall of Famer Degenerate Johnson.
Exactly. They've got two Hall of Famers in that backfield. Well, one definite Hall of Famer, one potential Hall of Famer. Yeah. We'll see how Chubb's career plays out. But they're going to have their run game, which they're going to lean heavily on with Nick Mullins at quarterback anyway. So I'm not really worried about their wide receiver issues because they're not going to play the ball. Yeah, they're not throwing the ball in this game. We know what they're going to do. And the Raiders defense is really good against the pass. Not so good against the run. They don't have that nose tackle run stuffing blocker in the middle that can really muck up rush lanes. They have a bunch of guys that are good at getting to the quarterback. And that's going to be a major factor here. The Raiders are a team you can run on, and the Cleveland Browns are a team that are going to try and run in this game. Another thing is athletes are creatures of habit. They like routine. So even though the Raiders have everybody, they're still going to be very thrown off by this extra day. This was something that has made a significant change for them for this week. And they've also got a divisional game next week that they're looking ahead to right now. This team, I don't know how focused they're going to be for this contest at this point. The other factor that you really shouldn't handicap on, but that I'm going to in this spot is just the Browns are the team with the motivation here. They're the ones with the billboard material just because of the adversity that they've actually had to go through with all this. Going back, how many games have we seen with some of these COVID teams where they step up to the plate, the backups step up and say, hey, you know what? This is my time to shine. This is my one shot right now. And they just play that extra. They played with that extra effort. They play with that tenacity of a team that everybody's counting out because they've had to go through all this stuff. And I feel like that's going to bring them together a little bit. I mean, I'm pointing back to actually in the MLS playoffs this season, in the Eastern Conference Final, Philadelphia was without like half of their starting roster because of COVID. And everybody goes, oh, well, New York City's just going to trounce them. They did beat them, but it was a much tougher game against these backups and kids than you ever would have guessed. And it is that factor of these athletes. They have that adversity. They have that extra gear that they want to get into. Yes, it's handicapping on human emotion, but it's a thing that is very real when it comes to sport. And I don't approve of handicapping on human emotion, but I do think the adversity, the overcoming adversity edge is real. And also it's the Raiders, and they're absolutely in prime position to blow this spot just so that they can then go and complain about how if they had played this game when it was supposed to be played, they would have won, even though that means you wouldn't have been playing most of the Browns roster.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear what you are saying, but if I have the opportunity to chase some of that steam and to get the 2.5 when it's 3 at most places, I feel like that's a lot of value that you probably don't want to pass up. But like, that's also on the perspective of like, you feel as if you need to take a position on the side. And I honestly might rather just stay away, you know.
For me, it's Browns money line or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're getting some value on that. I don't really want to lay points with the Raiders in any football game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. So I'm either getting value on the Browns and seeing if they pull a cool upset or not playing the game.
Yeah. Well, and I can see going with the underdog Browns here because I am interested in the under. And so the Raiders have scored fewer than 20 points in 5 of 6 games without Henry Ruggs. So it's not like they are an offensive juggernaut.
Yeah.
The Browns, they're starting Nick Mullins. I don't know what else needs to be said about that besides they're starting Nick Mullins. So they're not going to be at their best offensively. I'm very skeptical we see a lot of points. But again, I'm not sure if I'm going to be taking a position on this or not. I might take the under closer to game time. What I can say for sure is that I am not looking at the over. If I'm betting the total in this game, I will be going under. And honestly, looking at it now, I feel like I wish I would have bet it an hour ago because it's moved a point down. It's still 41 at DraftKings. It's 40.5 everywhere else. I could see this line continuing to move down.
I could see it continuing to move down. If it gets that low, I'm honestly tempted to take the over on the merit that the Browns have the 4th best rushing attack in the league and the Raiders have the 26th worst rushing defense. I think the Browns are going to be able to move the football in this game. Again, a little bit of bias. The last time Nick Mullins went out and played against the Raiders, he looked like the second coming of Joe Montana. So that's a thing that did happen. Like he is not the worst backup quarterback I've ever seen.
That's an incredibly twisted way of making a bullish argument about someone. Like, Tom, you're not the worst producer that I've ever had. You know what I'm saying?
I'm hearing that means I'm at the very least in the top. I'm going to guess 5 because I don't feel like there's been that many of us.
I've survived. Okay. I've survived all of you producers. Anyway. Okay. So I don't know if I'm going to be taking a position on this game either way, on the side or the total. This is just a disgusting game in general. Even if both of these teams were totally healthy, this would feel like a disgusting game. You add the COVID issues on top of that. You add the fact that it's on a Monday afternoon. I don't really want to have any investment in this game, except for a prop, of course.
Yeah. I could see these games getting to 21 points apiece. 21 points apiece. I could see these teams getting there.
Yeah.
But it's not something I want to bet on.
Yeah.
What I do want to bet on is whatever prop bet that we're taking today, because it's always fun to tail those and make some easy money.
Okay. I am looking at Hunter Renfrow over 76.5 yards receiving. I bet this at FanDuel minus 110 odds. Since week 12, when tight end Darren Waller exited early with an injury, Hunter Renfrow has averaged an elite 11 targets on a per game basis, gone over 100 yards receiving in each of those games, 3 games. He's also been targeted a little farther downfield, 6.9 average depth of target for the last 3 weeks versus a 5.7 average depth of target in weeks 1 through 3. So weeks 1 through 11. So it's not just that he's getting more targets, although that's primarily it. It's also that his targets naturally, if he is turning them into receptions, are going to result in more yards. So there are, I think, multiple reasons to be bullish on him. I, normally don't like to go over on props unless there's, I think, a compelling reason to do so. But the fact that Hunter Renfrow, 11, 10, 14, he's getting a ton of targets each week. He's basically turned into a smaller version of Cooper Kupp in terms of how the Raiders are using him, right? Playing heavily in the slot, but getting a ton of targets, easily leading the team in target volume. Hunter Renfrow over 76.5 yards receiving is a prop I like a lot.
It blows. It is my favorite thing about the NFL is the fact that Hunter Renfrow and DK Metcalf play the same position.
I mean, yes, technically they're labeled the same position.
I mean, if you want to make the argument that the thing is at this point, Hunter Renfrow is wide receiver 3 over the past, 8 weeks, and DK Metcalf is wide receiver 26.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Renfrow is easily outproducing DK Metcalf at this point.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's funny because he has a skill set that is often undervalued, like that middle of the field slot skill set. But if a guy can do it really well, it seems like there are a lot of guys who can do it slightly above average, but very few guys who can do it really, really well. And if a guy can do that really well, then he is worth so much to your team. I'd say like he is worth more than a perimeter receiver, unless the perimeter receiver is like on, I don't know, like a Devontae Adams type of level.
Yeah, it's all about being able to pick up those scrappy yards when you need them.
Yes, Tom.
It is. I always love the Wayne Corbett, like that type of receiver.
Yes. I mean, yeah. And a lot of it is about like, if a guy is able to read the defense well on the option routes, then he can get open pretty easily. And because he's closer to the line of scrimmage and he's in the middle of the field, those are easier targets to be completed for the passer. So like the quarterback is incentivized to look to that receiver, and the receiver has an easier chance versus a perimeter receiver of turning those targets into receptions.
He was a rare, great draft pick by the Raiders.
Yeah, he really was. That's
Yeah.
probably the best draft pick that they've had within that John Gruden era.
Yeah, I'd have to probably say so.
Yeah.
That's been some bad drafting. All right, let's move on to the actual Monday Night Football game. The marquee primetime slot here. The Vikings and the Bears. Minnesota opened -4. They're now at, a quick double check confirmed, still 6.5. The total opened 43.5, just up to 44.5. So still right in that range. Minnesota 7-6 ATS, 8-5 to the over. Chicago 4-9 ATS, 8-5 to the under. Anything on the spread here that you like?
I got nothing really. Mike Zimmer, he's had a overwhelmingly positive against the spread record for his career, but it has been very splitsy. And one of the splits is that Mike Zimmer, out of division, when he's going against teams that aren't familiar with him, does very, very well. But in division, he's 22-23 against the spread for his career. The Vikings have been in a lot of close games this year. More than 6 feels like too much. Kirk Cousins is 7-14 against the spread on any day that isn't Sunday. So think of like, games that tend to be in big spots, island games that disrupt his normal routine. He has historically not done well in that. He's 10-16 against the spread in prime time. The problem is I don't trust Matt Nagy as the Bears head coach. Teams are 30-15-1 against the spread against Matt Nagy since his second season with the Bears. This just feels like a disgusting game that I don't want to bet against. Like it feels like it will come down between 3 and 7 points, and I just don't want to take a stand on either of these teams.
I think that is very fair. At 4 points, you can talk to me about the Vikings.
Yeah.
At 6.5, I'm out.
Yeah.
That's too many points.
Yeah. Even at 4, if I took it at 4, it would be solely because I think it's going to move and I'm trying to chase closing line value, which by the way, hasn't worked out all that well for me this year, but it wouldn't be on the merits of the Vikings. It would be just trying to get ahead of a line.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes sense. And that's a perfectly valid way to bet. That's the way a ton of people bet. I know plenty of sports bettors who are at the book every day and they solely bet based on numbers and values. They don't even, some people couldn't even name you 3 NFL players and they bet on every NFL game.
Good for them. I wish I were them this season.
It's a numbers game. How about the total? Speaking of numbers here, sitting around 44.5 right now. What are you thinking?
I bet the under at 45. Bears quarterback Justin Fields has a 3-6 over/under record. Outdoor divisional games in December and January are 297 to 236 to 15 to the under. The Vikings, sizable favorites on the road. I think they're going to lean on the running game, and that could drive the game to the under. I don't think we're going to see a lot of passing in this game, especially from the Vikings. I think they're just going to run the ball. I think that will result in a game that finishes around like 38 points or 39 points, maybe 42 points.
I could see it ending up right around there. I mean, I don't really trust either one of these offenses all that much right now. You're kind of relying on Dalvin Cook to hit the over.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about some prop bets here. Starting off, Kirk Cousins. You like him not to have a big game through the air tonight?
I'm looking at Kirk Cousins under 32.5 pass attempts. I bet this at DraftKings at minus 110 odds. As I mentioned earlier, the Vikings are significant road favorites. I think that means they rely on the running game to control the ball and to grind down the clock. It seems like the Vikings would want to minimize the impact of Cousins in a primetime game, especially with the temperature that's in the 30s and winds approaching 10 miles per hour, potentially with gusts exceeding that at Soldier Field. So I'm looking under Kirk Cousins 32.5 pass attempts.
And how about on the other side here, Justin Fields? You're liking him on an over, but it isn't through the air.
Yes. Justin Fields over 37.5 yards rushing at BetMGM minus 110 odds. I will freely admit this line feels like a trap. Okay. This feels very trappy. Fields has started rushing more recently, especially since week 6. That was really when he started doing more as a runner. And in each of his 5 full games since then, he has gone over this number: 38, 43, 45, 74, and 103 yards rushing. So every game since he really started doing work on the ground, he has been able to clear this number. In one game, just barely cleared it. In some other games, easily cleared this number. And he's done it in each game with 6 to 10 carries. So he has had legitimate rushing volume, legitimate attempts to drive these yardage totals that we've seen. So I'm leaning into that trend. We've seen it historically that books have been slow when it has come to rushing quarterbacks. They were slow with Lamar Jackson years ago. They've been slow with Jalen Hurts, last year, this year. I think they're still slow on Justin Fields and adjusting to the fact that he is not just a pocket passer, but someone who is more willing to leave the pocket and scramble and be used a little bit on some design runs. So Justin Fields, I'm going over 37.5 yards rushing. Although I do have to say, setting it right under 38 as the lowest number that we've seen from him since week 6, that just feels a little fishy to me, but I'm going to take it.
All right, we'll have to see if it works out. Another rushing prop that you're looking at, Dalvin Cook. You like him 91.5 yards tonight, over or under?
I'm going over Dalvin Cook, 91.5 yards rushing. I got this at DraftKings minus 115 odds. This is my favorite bet of the night. And even if Dalvin Cook has a great game on the ground, I still think that there is room for this game to go under. So I'm fine, betting the under and betting the over on Dalvin Cook. I do think that those outcomes are correlated with Cook having a massive game on the ground. He's played in 4 victories this season. In those games, he's had 22 to 29 carries. I mean, that is a huge workload, and he has rushed for 86, 94, 140, and 205 yards in those 4 games. That's a massive range, but skewed heavily towards the over. In just 1 of 4 games, he has gone under 91.5 yards rushing. Obviously, the massive game that he had, 205 yards, came on Thursday Night Football. He's had extra time to rest and another day of rest because he's playing on Monday Night Football. And look at what he did last year. In 6 games, 6 victories last year, Cook had 18 to 32 carries. So again, huge workload when the Vikings win. In most of those games, easily over 20 carries. And he rushed for 61, 96, 120, 130, 163, and 206 yards. So in those 6 games, he cleared 91.5 yards rushing in 5 of them. The Vikings, again, significant favorites. And even if they don't win, I think Dalvin Cook is still going to get his usage. In his 2 games against the Bears last year, he had 96 yards and 132 yards rushing. I mean, it's a big number, 91.5 yards rushing. But given that the Vikings are significant favorites, given that he's had success against the Bears in the past, given the way in which the Vikings tend to use him when he is favored, I very much like him in this spot.
You just love making my life difficult because I hear this is my favorite prop of the night. And I'm like, cool, this is our Twitter clip. Boom. 4-minute rant.
Sorry.
All good.
You'll just have to cut it. You'll just have to cut it. Yeah.
Yep. And you're going to make me actually do work here, Matt.
Was that actually 4 minutes? I'm going to take the under on 4 minutes.
I'll let you know in post. We'll see how long it was. I'd set the line closer to 3.
Okay. I was going to say I would set it more at like 230.5.
All right. We'll have to see. That would make my life a little bit easier. That's not as much to cut.
Yeah.
The last prop that we have on the board here, though, before we get out of here, Justin Jefferson over 93.5 yards receiving.
You know, Tom, this might be my favorite. No, I'm just joking. I was thinking maybe I could just repackage this as the favorite and then make life easier on you.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're betting against yourself a little bit? Would it be a one or the other situation with these? Of if Cook has a big game, maybe Jefferson's production gets hurt, or no?
Yeah, and normally it's a good question. Normally you wouldn't want to be betting in a situation like that of having betting on a big game with a running back, big game with a wide receiver, and also going under. That's not those correlations aren't good. But the thing is, the usage tree for the Vikings, especially if Adam Thielen is out, it is so narrow and so constrained, basically just to Justin Jefferson and to Dalvin Cook. Some targets will go to KJ Osborne, but it really is just those two guys. And kind of think about like the Packers, right? Like for a while, it's been Aaron Jones. Now you have AJ Dillon in the mix, but think back to last year, year before that, even Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams as like the two guys within that offense. And they could put up a lot of production and hit the over simultaneously without the Packers actually having to have a massive game. I think that's the kind of situation that we have here. So I'm looking at Justin Jefferson over 93.5 yards receiving. I bet this at Caesars minus 110 odds. Adam Thielen is technically a game time questionable decision, but I doubt he actually plays. And even if he does, he likely won't be anywhere close to his full self. He didn't practice at all last week. Last year in week 12 without Thielen, Jefferson had 13 targets. In week 14, when Thielen left the game after just 6 snaps, Jefferson had 14 targets. Last week, he had 15 targets without Thielen. Assuming that Thielen is out, Jefferson will once again have uber elite target volume. And I know that I bet on him last week, basically with the same thesis, and it didn't work out. But he had 15 targets. If you tell me that Justin Jefferson is going to have double-digit targets, I will almost automatically be betting the over on whatever line you set, as long as it is within the realm of reason. So the usage has been very encouraging. I think we see that again tonight. So I'm going back to it. Justin Jefferson over 93.5 yards receiving.
All right, Matt. Well, that is going to do it for us here on the Degenerate Sports Betting Show. Where can people find all the great content you're putting out each and every day?
You can find all of the content at FTN Network. On Friday, I publish the Fantasy Football Breakdown. On Thursday, the Best Bets article. On Tuesday, the Fantasy Rankings, which I update on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then all throughout the week, in the FTN Best Tracker, I'm putting in my NFL sides, totals, and player props. And on Twitter, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, and on FTN, you can see all of the episodes of the Freedman Fantasy Football Show and the Degenerate Sports Betting Show. And always use the highly original promo code Freedman for 20% off at FTN. All right, that is the show. You can find me and Tommy V on Twitter at Matt F. The Oracle and TV at Work. Thanks for joining us, and see you next episode.